Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session that we are going to be together. My name is Solange Mbonigaba, and I'm working for Tearfund as it is presented in the program. And I'm going to be with you for 20 minutes. In these 20 minutes, I'll be just sharing the perspective of Tearfund on working with the survivors of sexual gender-based violence, female and male. This session was meant to be for one of the survivors network, but unfortunately they were not able to make it, and I had to just play a role in the meantime. David, your hand up. Any question?
Hi, Solange. Thank you for your introduction. I'm David Dewoy, and I'm also going to be a co-facilitator. I'll be facilitating with Jacqueline also in this session, and we'll be welcoming you, Solange, and also Walter.
Okay, thank you. I could see the time was running. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I know, still waiting for other people to join us from the main session. Perhaps just given a few minutes, like 1 or 2, and then we can start.
Hello, David. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Jacqueline.
Hello.
Finally, you are here. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Solange.
Hello.
So, okay, all right. So as we wait for others to join us, in the meantime, I think we can just continue with our session. So I would like to again introduce my name. I'm David Ewoy, and I'm the facilitator in the session. And I'm being joined by my colleague, Jacqueline. Perhaps I could give her an opportunity to introduce herself.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. My name is Jacqueline Kiambi from the UN Women, and I'll be your co-facilitator for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Basically in this session, we have 2 speakers, and we have the first speaker will be Solange Mbonigaba, and she will also be joined by Walter Vengesai after her session. And the 2 sessions here are basically talking about working with survivors of GBV, particularly male survivors of gender-based violences. So it's just a continuation of the earlier session that was held previously. So we'll be looking at actually ways in which to also support particularly men who are who are survivors of gender-based violences. Now, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Solange Mbonigaba. Solange Mbonigaba is joining us from Tearfund. She works for Tearfund, and she works under the Department of Gender and Protection Unit. And she's also the coordinator of the survivor movement globally. And she's also a GBV advisor in the Southern East Africa region. She will be talking, she'll be taking us through the transformative approaches of engaging men and boys, particularly working with survivors of sexual gender-based violences. She'll be highlighting the journey of healing of survivors and also actually taking us through the processes of healing. And also she might be mentioning some of the lessons learned as well as the recommendations that she has learned in regards to this engaging of male in engaging, working with the survivors of STBV, particularly men. So Solange Mbonigaba, please, you're welcome. Welcome, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, I was under pressure of time as we have been missing on time. That's why I wanted to kickstart, undermining that introduction is always needed. You continue with the slides. Yeah. As Tearfund, in trying to respond to this program of sexual gender-based violence, we had to hear from the survivors. And this is a question to you again. Are you listening to survivors of sexual gender-based violence? Imagine meeting someone telling you that his or her life was destroyed because of what has happened to him or her, and she's feeling only nothing else, pain, anger, depression, and loneliness, among others. What will you do? Imagine, without listening to this, and we sit as an organizations, and we design a program, we design a project, but we don't have this, the particular story that comes from survivors of sexual gender-based violence. We picked up all these key stories from the informative research. You may move on the next slide. Informative research, we knew that we have no knowledge about what survivors are going through. We knew that we cannot understand their needs until we hear it from them. And as Tearfund, we had to start with the listening through that informative exercise, which is research, and it has to be our starting point. So far, we have worked through 15 countries from Latin America, Asia, Africa, West Africa, Southern region, and we were able to gather the voices of 485 survivors. Also, the findings across countries have similar findings and highlighted the key theme. When you want to work with the survivors, you need to have this key theme with you. There is the issue of stigma in our society, in our home, in our church, everywhere. And there is that shame that instead of being killed by the perpetrator, is put up on the survivors. That we need to know. There is a rejection. You know what our culture says. There is abandonment and punishment in some places. You know, in some churches, when you get raped, they excommunicate you. Instead of embracing you and put you in a place, instead they just push you aside, and the perpetrator remain in the church. We saw how physical and emotional trauma the survivors are going through, looking at their voices, what they were telling us. And also the findings highlight the need for holistic response. We needed to ensure that there is a coverage on legal system, there is a coverage on financial needs of survivors, the healthcare support, and also highlighted the need for a network for survivors, because that will play a key role for them, and as well as other people who are going to be a support system to them. Next. In listening to those voices, we made it as a commitment, as a Tearfund, to partner with them. And by partnering them, we came up with an approach which we called a journey to healing, not even as Tearfund. The survivors themselves, they called it a journey to healing. That journey has to start with the focused group survivors. They have it to be together. And by being together, it means a lot to them. These survivors of sexual gender-based violence include even survivors of HIV and AIDS, because sexual gender-based violence, in the research, we have realized that it's an entry point of HIV. That's why we did not leave them out. And we aimed at working with the survivors for them to be able to provide peer-based support, because among themselves, there are what they can share to be meaningful to them. And again, as Tearfund, we wanted to really push them forward by really mobilizing them into a movement, because we know a movement, something big, it's beyond a capacity of individual. Those are the things that we are trying to do. And this journey to healing, it has phases. These survivors of sexual gender-based violence, whether male or female, for them, they live in an unsafe environment. But by bringing them in a support, a peer support group, you continue where you are, it's fine. By bringing them in a peer support group, they are able to bring that sense of safety around themselves, because they needed to see what is happening in the society around them, and they needed to hear someone saying, I hear you, I can feel for you, and I am here for you. That is what they need. The next slide, please. And by being able to connect among themselves and bring that safety issue around themselves, they are also becoming one. You know, that social cohesion, it comes from them. That is when they start really having hope for the future. And we are hoping that this model should really speak to many of us here, because we are part of this society. I might be speaking here being one of them, but because I'm sitting in an office, one will never notice. But let us speak the same language. Can you go to the next slide, please? That second phase that I've touched on, that will help the survivors in the peer support group to build their hope, will even be a foundation for the next phase, where they are going to looking for how they are going to share their growth with the other people. Then by becoming together, you know, building security around themselves and raise hope again of the future that they have lost, they are able to grow. And the next thing is for them to go out in the society and share their growth with the others. This model is meant to raise the wounded healer, you know, those who have been wounded to become healers. And once they become healers, we give them opportunity to become the actors in the society, community actors, becoming active participants in our society. Next slide, please. Yeah, this process is summarized in one key thing: mobilizing survivors in the peer support group to achieve safety, hope, and growth. And then after, we put them into a system that will add on what they have, or to get what they did not have. putting them in a training. Once we support them on that level, we train them, they become the resource in the society. And that is when we say this sexual gender-based violence work in the community, it should be led by those who have journeyed through. Where are they here? We've been talking, and they've been even making it clear to us that nothing about them without them. But we're still lacking them in a platform like these ones. Unfortunately, I was going to bring them and they were not available because we thought of them a bit late. But I hope if they were here, they were going to say more from their own perspective as the people who have journeyed through this process. Now, once they are trained and they empowered, they become the champions because they are in the society. They are the champion where we have given them safety, safe space for them to be what God had made them to be. The next slide, please, which will be almost the last one, because I just need just a discussion or questions where things are not clear. But the last slide is showing their statement. What are they telling us? There are some affirmation from their side. Can you go on the next slide, please? Okay, before the last slide, I wanted to touch on this lesson learned as Tearfund. Survivors, if they were here, they would share more about what they have learned in the process of healing and in the process of being who they are. You know, as Tearfund, we were able to learn that speaking out with one voice will fight stigma, violence, and impunity. Who is that one I'm referring to? It's all of us here. And I really, really appreciate the presentations since morning. You know, they are linking up, you know, they are aligned. I really follow the presentation from IRC and another presenter from Uganda. I wish we can be well coordinated and share what we have in terms of what we do to our community regularly. Yeah, we needed to ensure that we have learned that safe space for healing is crucial for survivors of sexual gender-based violence, especially through the peer support group model. Without allowing them, you know, to have that safe space where they are going to learn that, wow, I was not alone. Hey, actually, I thought I'm alone on this earth. They will remain invisible in the society. But the moment we create a safe space for them, for sure, they will come out, because in that support group, that in that safe space for themselves, they are able to grow, as I mentioned. And when they grow, they share with the society out there. We learned also that supported survivors are able to lead. We have a good example of one network that we started with. There's a Tearfund. It's called Pepita Survivor Network. Pepita being a Zulu name, a Zulu word that meant to say, don't worry, you know, I'm here for you. We are together. You know, I feel for you. Pepita Survivor Network. This network is doing great things. Like during COVID-19, who was going to remember survivors if it's not the survivors who knows the other survivors in the society? COVID-19 had shown that we needed to move out of our comfort zone and go into those sensitive areas of our society that we've been looking at and do something. But they did something for themselves. They would keep the WhatsApp on open, speaking to each other. They had put some money in their support group, and they used those money to keep their communications line open, so they cannot fall into the same situation they were in before. Therefore, if we can afford them opportunity, they are able to lead a movement. However, the challenges that we face, that I see as Tearfund, now I'm speaking as Tearfund, it's this gap at institutional and service provision level. We will talk about working with the women and the girls, men and the boys, but the survivors are left out because it's a unique group. It's a unique group that has a unique needs, that they have a unique understanding of the things that are happening in their community. Therefore, we need to ensure that we don't leave any out, including survivors. The behavior at our societal level and the community level and the attitude is still a huge challenge. And really, I appreciated again the presentation that we had earlier, how they were able to tackle on this. But we needed to go down, you know, from the bigger picture to the smaller picture. That is when we'll be able to impact, you know, these people who are struggling with their toxic behavior and attitude, because you can't address a toxic behavior without reaching the real individual. Another thing that we picked up is Tearfund. It's limited funds in the field of working with the survivors. You find we get funds that is going to last a month. Dealing with the issues of trauma, you can't plan a project of a month or a year. For sure, we need enough time, and time is going to be also a resource that we need really to spare on these issues of working with survivors if we were to impact their lives. And the last one that I was talking about is the sentences that survivors had shared with me that I should always present when I'm talking to the platform like this one. Next, please. Yes, they are saying silent no more. We often sit in our platform here and we say they are not able to come to speak because they are shy. No, there are those who have grown, those who have really become the active participant in the society. They are saying silent no more. And they said, telling our stories could prevent such crime from happening to other girls and women and men and boys, and saying, together we are strong. This is a sentence from the women groups that I facilitated years ago. And together they are saying, we will break the silence to prove the world how often sexual violence destroys humankind as a whole. There is no shame for the survivor to bear. The shame is for the perpetrator. And that's what we should agree here. Your story is important. Now they are speaking. Your voice is important and it needs to be heard. Yes, we needed to bring them here so we can hear them. There are those who have grown, who are no longer in tears. They get in tears when we leave them out of this platform. You are not to be blamed for what has happened, that they are repeating. Yes, as I started as an introduction, often in the society, in our cultural belief, we see a woman who gets assaulted, quickly we judge, quickly we blame her, but we shouldn't blame them of what happened. May God bless you. And I think all resources are on Tearfund website and I slide. Everyone who can put on the website of Tearfund as it is on the next slide, please. You will be able to get the resources that are here. We developed three resources while we were working with the survivors. They are the ones who were indicating us the way how they can be helped. And one resource is called a shared journey, which is a training manual. That training manual is helping to develop these community actors, active participants, the gender champion, survivors champion, who are going to lead the work in their communities. And we developed also an out of the shadow into the light. This is a workbook. These community actors, they needed to have a book with the resources that is going to help them to help other survivors in their society. I really thank you for listening, and I'll be happy if there is more time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solange, for that powerful presentation. I believe participants, we have all been able to, we've been challenged about listening to survivors, because it looks like a lot of funding is going on just to general survivors as well as just prevention activities. But now from the presentation, we are being reminded the important role of listening to the survivors of gender-based violences, and also finding interventions that directly reach out to men, so that they can also open out and be able to speak out in one voice about GBV violences that are being committed to anyone, regardless of their sexual orientation or regardless of their age, because GBV is committed to everyone. Thank you so much, Solange. That has been a very powerful presentation. We have really enjoyed, and I'm very sure perhaps this session, we have learned so much, particularly in terms of the journey to healing, which majorly focuses on the survivors, and also it empowers them to the level whereby they are able to speak out, they're able to build a movement, and they're able to move out of this stigma, the shame that perhaps most of them or most of the survivors are still experiencing, and that is hindering them even to look for services or look for support elsewhere. But the session, most of the lessons learned that we've picked are actually things that we see are very realistic. And I also want to give this opportunity in case all participants, if there is any questions that you will want or any clarification you would like, Mrs. Boeing, our presenter, to expound, or anything that is still not clear on you, perhaps you could just drop the text there in the chat box. And then if we have time at the end of the second presentation, then we could invite her so that she could be able to respond with some of those questions. So thank you for that. And next in the line, I would like to invite Mr. Walter Vengesai, who is joining us from PADARE, or Men's Forum. He's the National Director of PADARE, and is a passionate person working with men and boys to end gender-based violences and all forms of gender discrimination. Mr. Walter is someone who envisions a society that is free from gender stereotypes and violence. And he also comes with a vast of experience in the areas of social justice, gender equality, project implementation, community. Yes, I could continue. And today, Walter is joining us. He's joining us from Harare, Zimbabwe, where he specializes in working with men and boys through PADARE. So Walter will be speaking to us also about experiences of male survivors of GBV as evidence in the work of PADARE, in which he's going to share more about the lessons learned and also experiences from the interventions. So feel welcome, Mr. Walter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David, for those welcoming remarks. Maybe let me also first thank the organizers of this symposium. I think we have benefited a lot from just listening to other speakers. So I think my presentation will be focusing more on experiences of male survivors of gender violence here in Zimbabwe. So I work for an organization called PADARE, Engundleni Men's Forum on Gender. Our organization explicitly works with men and boys around issues to do with gender. And one of the thematic areas that we focus on is around offering psychosocial support to both survivors and victims of gender-based violence. So in our country here in Zimbabwe, gender-based violence is used to refer to violence against women and girls, and most people take it that way. And because of cultural norms and because of patriarchy, violence against men is not that is in the mainstream. So I think it then makes discussion very, very important. And also it's important to locate PADARE as an organization in terms of the work that we also do. I also, before I proceed with the presentation, I also want to offer a disclaimer to say that my presentation should in no way be construed to mean or to lessen the struggle of women survivors, which constitute the majority of survivors even here in Zimbabwe. We have almost 90% of reported cases of gender-based violence being violence against women and girls. But I just wanted to say that so that when I do make the presentation, it doesn't seem like I'm lessening those statistics. But today I just wanted also to bring to the fore the other side, which is often not commented about, which is often not talked about, which is the side of violence against men and boys. So I think I'll start by introducing the organization that I work for, PADARE. So our work, you can go to the next slide. So our work as PADARE is rooted in promoting the role of men and boys in promoting social justice through the promotion of gender equality, prevention of gender-based violence, promotion of sexual, reproductive, and health rights for women and girls, and also including male involvement in family planning, and also in responsible parenthood. So at PADARE, we use a gender transformative approach that actively strives to change gender norms and change the common perceptions around masculinity. We believe discourse on gender has largely been targeted at to women, and this situation has resulted in less accountability or less responsibility for men in the area of gender transformation. So at PADARE, we are convinced that men and boys must be involved in gender transformation. It should also be part of the solution, and leaving them out might result in delays in achieving gender justice. You can go there. So over the years, together with our partners, we've designed and implemented programs that work with men and boys for gender justice. We have developed a model for working with men and boys that we call PADARE Men and Boys in Action, or PAMBIA, which looks at ways of confronting and challenging harmful cultural practices and social norms that promote negative masculinities. So this is achieved through contextualized events with men and boys that focus on gender, masculinity, power, and also advocacy on gender equality issues. So I think this background is important in that when we deal, our experience when we deal with men and boys is mostly that are not really comfortable in coming out. Their definition of masculinity prevents them from coming out as far as them reporting issues to do with gender-based violence. So when we engage men, you can go to the next slide. When we engage men as facilitators of positive change in their communities. And we have taken advantage of already existing positive contributions that men and boys make in the society, and we are trying to build on those. We believe men can and are capable of being loving, caring, and nurturing. So this is against a background where in our country, where most male engagement is centered around perceiving men as perpetrators of gender-based violence and rarely as people who can make positive contributions. So when men are engaged in most cases, they are engaged in relation to how we can better the outcomes of women, and the focus is really on them. So we are trying to do both, work with men as facilitators for better outcomes for women and girls, and also bring in an element. We also focus on their needs as well, trying to also make sure that we cater for the needs of both men and boys. So we create spaces where men and boys are free to explore their fears and anxieties about mostly issues to do with their masculinities. And we are doing this through structures, community-based structures that we call PADARE chapters. So these are mostly groups of men in communities who meet regularly to discuss issues that affect them. So these safe spaces, we help men to also talk amongst themselves about issues that affect them, and also explore their fears and anxieties, as well as to discuss issues of how best they can also deal with issues to do with gender-based violence as far as it affects them. So we also services that support transformation. For example, we offer free family therapy services in and out with and also in and out of prison counseling for both gender-based violence perpetrators and also gender-based violence survivors. So our context is such that I think most organizations that work around issues, they work with women and girls. So it's only recently that we are trying to also strengthen the local men engage chapter, the Zimbabwean chapter, and also have organizations that are coming out that also work with men and boys as well. So the focus was mainly on women and girls, and this most men without capacity in dealing with just having an understanding on gender and also dealing with gender-based violence issues. And more importantly, the focus was on female gender-based violence survivors, and very little attention was also focused on the perpetrators themselves. So what then would happen is that you would have cycle of violence continuing. A woman suffers gender-based violence, they go to a woman's organization, they get counseling, and then they go back home after that counseling, but really they have talked to the perpetrator, and we tried to fill in that gap where we also work hand in hand with other stakeholders within the referral pathway, so that GBV perpetrators are referred to PADARE. They also go through psychosocial support. And this is mostly important in our context because most of the survivors are not comfortable to have the perpetrators arrested, because mostly this will be the fans and the breadwinners. So you would find out that the cycle of violence was continuing. So we began to offer that that service to the perpetrators as well. And we even have programs that are even running now, where we are also going to prisons. Even those perpetrators that have been arrested, you find that most of your sentences for GBV perpetrators, they don't exceed 12 months. So after those 12 months, the cycle will then continue. So that we are also doing as an organization, we are working with the prison services. We go into the prisons, we identify the GBV perpetrators, and we also offer them psychosocial support and rehabilitation and reintegration services, so that when they get out of the prisons, in position to also break that cycle of violence. So go to the next slide. So in our work, we empower men to challenge harmful cultural and religious practices that also hinder them from embracing positive masculinities through challenging negative stereotypes. For example, men have emotions which in some cases they are expected to display, such as anger and aggression. At times they are ridiculed for feeling pain and compassion. And some of the consequences of these social expectations is men engaging in negative behavior, including being violent. In our interventions, we present to men and boys some of the negative impacts of patriarchy for both men and women. For example, the issue of how men should be breadwinners, household leads, independent, and so on. In other words, I'm saying we try to inculcate positive masculinities amongst the men and boys, and also challenge the negative forms of masculinities that are present in our society at the moment. We also engage young boys out of schools on the negative effects of patriarchy, especially on women and girls and themselves. So I think, as I said before, it goes back to the issue of trying to deal with social norms that create this man who doesn't need help, who can express his manhood, certain traits that at times are harmful. So that's what we're trying to challenge, and that also prevents some of this from coming out, the shame and the stigma that I think previous speakers have talked about. You can go to the next slide. So I think as PADARE, just to give you some of the statistics and some of the cases we come across, I think on average, our counselors were dotted throughout the country, and on average, I think we see about 60 male survivors a month, and our clients come to us normally after extended periods of time of suffering abuse, and this is mainly because of the shame that I have talked about, and it comes a lack of knowledge of what to do when one is confronted by situation where they are suffering violence. And we have also discovered that men rarely make decisions to come in on their own. In most cases, they are pushed or referred by relatives, friends, at times by the courts, and also at times they are referred to us by civil society organizations. I think this has to do with the patriarchy that I was talking about. Masculinity is defined in such a way that for most of the men and for most boys, they have low help-seeking behavior amongst them, and on their own, even when they are suffering sexual abuse, for example, they don't take it as abuse as men, and they're not comfortable to, in some cases, to report it. That's why in most cases, this is especially common amongst teenagers, where the household help sometimes abuse the young boys, but they take it as victory. They didn't take it as abuse, but they welcome the abuse and they don't recognize it as such. So we try and also go into the communities and raise more awareness amongst the men, so that at least they can come out, they recognize, and they can come out to report the abuse as soon as possible. So to also indicate, with most of our clients are married and in the age demographic between 30 and 60 years. These are mostly the people who come to for help after suffering violence. You can go to the next slide. So the majority of clients, for the majority of our clients, the violence occur in the midst, or they have to do those cases, and in such cases, at times the men suffer physical abuse, and at times the cases will involve loss of property. There's also a lot of violence that occur of misconceptions around issues to do with what many men refer to as conjugal rights. So I think this is a very contentious issue here in Zimbabwe for most married couples, because the men pay the bride price, and culturally, women in marriages encouraged not to say no to their husbands, but because now women understand their rights, they are also contesting the idea of conjugal rights. So this has resulted in most of violence that also take place, sexual violence that also take place, that come to us as well, where men feel like they are entitled to, or they have rights, conjugal rights of their wives, and their wives also saying no. They need to be consent issues have to be recognized. So we have dealt with a lot of cases related to that as well. We also assist a lot of men who are psychological, emotional abuse at the hands of their spouses because of failure to provide for their families. I think this is a big issue for us now in Zimbabwe. Our economy is not working well, and this has affected a lot of men because patriarchy demands that men should be the providers, and when men fail to provide, then a lot of violence is also happening as a result of that. We also have medical conditions that also lead to a lot of violence. Some of these include ED and many others. I think we also deal with cases where men abuse as a result of intergenerational marriages, where young spouses will take advantage of their older spouses. I'm saying this, I'm just highlighting these issues as they specifically affect men. We understand which men are also suffering violence. Also, isolated cases of aggravated indecent assault, so where men claim their abusers use drugs before the assaults. These include assaults by women and also assaults by other men as well. So here in Zimbabwe, our law doesn't recognize that men can get raped So it's classified as indecent, aggravated indecent assault. So yeah, it's also one of the affecting men, and it's very difficult for men to come out in the open and actually say, this has happened to me because of social norms issues as well. Your manhood is questioned when you say I was assaulted or I was raped by women. So you discover that even within the referral pathway, mostly with the police, most men have encountered a lot of challenges when they report such cases. Even to say I was assaulted by my wife, sometimes they are judged, sometimes they are not taken seriously. Even say I was raped as a man, sometimes they are not taken seriously as well. But it's something that we are also working with the authorities about, to say all survivors should be treated the same. All survivors should be given the same dignity, and should be dealt with as well. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of lessons learned, I think there is really it's really important.
Walter, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
I'm saying we have 4 minutes left to the next session, so therefore if you take 2 minutes to complete the presentation, that would be good.
Yeah, okay. So
Thank you.
I'm left with just two slides.
Okay.
I was learned, so the importance of referrals for survivors to benefit fully. So our referral pathway is really blind to the needs of men. Here in Zimbabwe, there are facilities for women, but and girls. But when it comes to men, I think it's really in some areas. There's also need to raise more awareness on the needs of men to seek help, and also to challenge social norms around masculinity. We also need to create more safe space for men to discuss their issues. This is really, really lacking. A lot of men are suffering in silence because they don't have anywhere to actually talk where they feel safe. And there are also no shelters for men. We have already, there is a shortage of shelters for women survivors, but none for male survivors. So it becomes very difficult to deal with. And also in terms of challenges, I'll just go quickly. There's to localize the researches in the area of transformative masculinities. There are also short programming periods where at times there are no resources to assist their survivors. I think this has been mentioned before. And our referral pathway is also not fully resourced. We need to raise more awareness in to deal with the issue of stigma against male survivors. I think I'll end here. Thank you so much.
Walter, for that wonderful presentation that you've done very well. So we're very happy to learn about engagement of PADARE, particularly in empowering the men and boys in terms of them changing their attitudes, in terms of them changing their social beliefs about gender stereotypes, and also engaging them to be on top of sexual health, as well as sexual health, and also be able to know the rights for women and girls, whereby male are also involved in the family planning processes. And I think with the new tool about the PAMBIA, the PADARE Men and Boy in Action, it's a very good tool that you've really told us about the way it's helping men be able to avoid those negative activities or negative coping mechanisms in terms of that are aligned to their cultural practices, And perhaps most of them now are changing that perspective from that cultural belief now to realizing or recognizing the rights and also the capacity and of every other person, including men and women. And I think majorly you've also told us about a lot of issues the survivors, male survivors experience, and they actually endure in silence. And also a lot of interventions that actually target these male survivors and empowering them to be able to be to come out of it and also seek help and also challenge their shame and stigma that is surrounded around the gender stereotype. So I know that there is no time for feedback because it's exactly 3:30 and we will be we are supposed to join back to the main session, and doing that means you have to exit in this. You have to exit in this parallel session, and then click the link of the main session in order for you to be able to join in the plenary session. So I want to thank the presenters, also want to thank the participants, and also want to thank my co-facilitator, Jacqueline, for the good role that all of you have done. And perhaps any feedback or questions can bring in the other plenary session, because our time is now up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How can we go to the plenary? Is there the link?